Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Lake Forest Park Budget Finance Committee meeting, July 16th, 2026. Calling to order at 6 p.m. We are going to skip the official adoption of the agenda as we do not have a Budget Finance Committee quorum. One is out and the other one just called in unavailable. So we are going to continue as just a yes, so we're gonna continue after I adjourn the meeting as just an enjoyable meeting. Okay, so with that, I adjourn the Budget Finance Committee meeting and we move forward on to Director's Report. As there is no
Oh, we have a
opportunity.
director, so.
Public, there's no public
Next.
comment period. Yeah, there's no public comment period and there's no director, so.
So moving on. Yeah.
Bit of a skeleton crew tonight then.
It really is, isn't it?
We do.
Okay.
I got kicked off, so give me just a minute and rejoin so I can pull up our.
Okay, no
Documents.
worries. I've been kind of looking through it. I didn't have any specific questions for you yet.
It's
So then I only have a comment or two on it, so.
Perfect.
I'll go pretty
We'll move
fast.
quickly through this. There it is.
So I'm waiting for a finance director this evening for you. 75% of the way through the biennium. So anything over 75 we take a look at. This is revenues, expenditures on the revenue side. The only thing I wanted to point out is you'll see some large percentages, 110%. Council contingency, 130% on budget stabilization. Those are just interest income.
Okay.
And so that's why you're seeing those deltas. And then the other large one is 207% on strategic opportunity fund, but that's recognizing the action council took to move money from unallocated fund balance to strategic opportunity fund. So that's why you see the large jump there.
Could you, or is there anything noteworthy about the ones from the revenue that came in under 75%?
The only one that I looked at was the 38%. That's on your transportation capital. And that's because those are mostly grants or reimbursable. So we recognize the revenue. But it doesn't come in on a monthly or quarterly basis. It's just as we either take on the $200,000 loan from Transportation Improvement Board, which is part of that, or we get reimbursement through WashDOT for the roundabout project.
Is that similar from the surface water capital?
Surface water.
404.
13%. Yeah, you did, so I'll have to get back to you on that one. And that's that one. No, because there are no grants in there, so I'm about to take that number. See what drives that surface capital. That might be the project. Nope. No. Well, I'm gonna have to take a look at 404. I will send you a report on why.
All right, and then you're moving to expenditures.
As far as expenditures, everything's at 75% or less. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about there. Everything's in line, so.
And the 407 PWTF repayment, that was kind of like a one-time payment, paid it all off.
Yep.
That's like where it's complete. It's complete.
Yeah, I think, I went back and watched the last meeting. Director Vaughn actually did cover that in the last meeting, so it seemed like. I actually went back to watch this.
I appreciate that.
Trying to get back up to speed.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Goldman, you have a hand up.
Looking at the expenditures, and I think I asked a similar question at a previous meeting. When they're running below the 75%, is that because project or operating expenses are coming in less than we anticipated? Or is it because we just haven't gotten around to some of the work that we're going to be doing?
This is usually the latter. We haven't gotten around to the work we anticipated at that point in time. Other times it can just be slow billing. I've seen that in the past. I don't think any of this would represent that. See if there's anything that would jump out to me.
So just to confirm, it would be a bit of a false economy to say, oh, wow, our budget's doing great. We're saving like $1 million. It just means that that million is going to be spent. It just hasn't been spent as fast as we anticipated.
I mean, I think if you look at transportation capital, that's gonna be the roundabout, slow burn that we go into construction on August 3rd, so you're gonna see that one ramp up pretty quick from that 21%. What else jumps out at me? Sewer capital, Rebecca is working on the, 30 to 100% design contract right now. So you've only to date done up to 30% design, so that'll be coming in and that you'll start to see the spend there. Anything else that jumps out? Vehicle equipment replacement. I think we're still paying for the motorcycle. I don't know that we've taken delivery.
Don't believe the motorcycles come yet.
Yeah, so that's gonna trail just because some of those purchases haven't been made.
We do have a couple of the trucks that were ordered for public works are soon.
So,
Soon it hits.
yes, I believe the F-150, the hybrid truck for the superintendent is still delivered, so you'll see that jump as well.
So I think as I understand it, it's gonna, the operational funds are the ones that are gonna track them more consistently with the percentages, which I think obviously is the general fund. I think the sewer utility and surface water utility tend to be closer to that as more of an operational fund. Everything else is, the expenditures are not consistently even throughout the year.
Next slide. Let's see, financial report, just looking at what's been spent to date, percentages. I think we've looked at this before, but obviously election voter costs, that was higher than was anticipated with the levy, and that was all paid in a lump sum. Just recently amended the budget. We added about $80,000 for this fall's levy on top of the dollar amount was already in there. Adopted as part of the budget. State audit had 5 audits that were conducted, and so that they conduct that many and they had a little bit of extra work to do on those. That adds to it. Part of that was our vet care, so they were looking at in detail. Yeah. All right, let's see. Leasing, emergency management, we just paid that still up front. Dispatch services are tracking a little bit ahead. That they do. Our utilization of that is slightly lower than was anticipated when we went into that contract with Norcom, and so there you can see some reimbursement on future bills for that, so that changed that slightly.
Cause we pay quarterly
Well, what it
with an
was
anticipated
is,
usage kind of feel.
no,
kind of
it
or-
was when we came from Bothell to Norcom. There wasn't an apple to apple comparison. So they took what data they could from Bothell and anticipated a use. Right, with Norcom, that they've gone and trued their numbers up and. I can't remember the dollar amount anyway, it's not a big fault, but it'll be done as a credit back to the city over the next many billings, so you see that. Amped down a little bit.
Thank you.
Cost. Everything else, planning, building departments run a little bit ahead. We still don't have a building official, relying on consultants still, so that one's going to track a little bit ahead. Parks and facilities maintenance, everything else looks good. Do you have any questions on this one? Legal, I skipped over legal. Legal is running ahead, but that is primarily due to the park, playground park, hearing examiner. So,
And I apologize for being late. Well, I said this at the beginning, the percent to date
75%.
before amendment, is that
No, this is with the.
Oh.
We should be at 75%. These dollars, should be, yes, with the amended budget. You see the original budget, you see the 25-26 amended budget, so that's in there.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure whether that column reflected the amendment.
Yeah, just. Well, let me back up. Does it reflect the latest amendment?
That's what I wondered.
Amended by the.
Yeah, because there are things that are over 100%, and that's why.
Yeah, I would have to double check with Trish on if we got that plugged in yet. I would say probably not. So that was only 3 weeks ago.
Exactly, yeah, that's.
Yeah, well, and this through June, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't
So, yeah,
apply
submit
anyways
by-
at this point,
Yep.
it would have been after.
You're right. Thank you. Any other questions on this sheet?
Councilmember Goldman?
Yeah, it's looking at the tree account. We haven't really spent really much of anything out of it. I think it's worth going back to the tree board because I know they inquired about it, but just to let them know that the account has about $14,000. If they're planning some sort of fall tree giveaway, just letting them know that that money presumably is available for them to tap into for some sort of tree related activities.
Yeah, I'll bring that up with Mark and we can report that at the next. Yeah.
Any other comments about budget monitoring or other financial updates or concerns for our city administrator? Okay, hearing none, we are going to move to old business. We're gonna take a look again at the budget calendar for the 27-28 biennium budget.
So all of the changes that were requested at the last meeting have taken place. The open to public comments on meetings has been removed, and then the November 12th meeting had been identified as a special city council meeting. It's not special, it's just a regular date council meeting. And then just as a reminder down the side, the beige colors are just notes of whether where I'll be remote for meetings. The one in August is tentative. I may not attend that conference. And then on September 10th, the reason it says tentative FD. We don't have a finance director by that point. That time may shift to later September, but we are on track currently. With the budget, got a few departments just wrapping up some things, that at that point we'll have where they expect to finish out the year. So then we'll have revenues to expenditures, so we'll know roughly what money we don't anticipate spending, which then we can use to populate the next budget. That'll just roll us right into preparing the mayor's budget after we report that to you in August, so.
I think you said this last time and my brain is just foggy, but for the departmental presentations to the mayor and city administrator, those are not open to the public
Or us.
us.
Yeah, it's just to the mayor and I.
That's what I thought.
And it would be the finance director as well if we had one, and that is for us to determine what in the mayor's budget is gonna be recommended to council and what we set off to the side. Transmittal letter will lay that out so that you have all the information and you may disagree with the mayor's budget, put something in there that he has left out, so.
Okay, any other? A reminder again, we're taking second half of August off, so there will not be a budget and finance committee meeting in August, but we will have that in September.
Yeah, this anticipates budget and finance, no second council meeting. Those are actually scheduled on your agenda for council meeting next week to cancel those meetings officially.
So our last meeting before our break is
August 13th.
August 13th. Thank you. All right, any other comments about the revised budget schedule?
It is anticipated that this will just be on consent of the next meeting, that once it's adopted, Councilmember Good had asked last time. Once it's adopted, then we will put it on the website, so.
Yes, that would be ideal. So thank you. And then I think our last item for the day is overview of the budget process. So this will be great for folks who haven't gone through this before, or those of us that want to refresh, and this will be available at folks who aren't available here tonight, those council members to rewatch at their leisure. So what would you like to tell us about the budget?
Budget 101, Mr. McLean gave me a hard time after last week's meeting. He's like, you delved away and started into budget 101. I said, well, it helped the conversation, so,
Slipped on his toes a little.
nah, he didn't care. He's just like, what do you do? Just an overview, as you know, the city budget provides an outline for future levels of service and legislative priorities. So, the mayor's budget will do that. You may have different priorities. You may want to see things that are funded at different levels, whether that's up or down. And so at this point in time, it is the mayor's budget. Once it's transmitted to you on September 10th or somewhere around there, then it becomes council's budget. And at that point in time, the entire city council then becomes the budget and finance committee. And then that's when you start discussing what's been presented to you, what you'd like to change. Any changes to it will be required for council members agreeing to that change to make that to that document. Acts as a legal document for local government officials and authority to incur obligations and pay expenses. I mean, may say things that are gonna be on the next slide, but all is in my head. There are a couple different things. You may recognize revenue and allocate the expenses and the department spends within that based off of the revenues. You also may put a dollar amount in the strategic opportunity fund, but you don't allocate the expense until the administration brings you project forward. And you've done that in the past. So that's probably the main exception to where dollars are allocated, but no expense incurred just by adoption of the budget. A lot of times that
Similar
comes through
to
as
the-
a proviso.
Similar to the tree account.
Allocates resources among departments. That way everybody knows what they got to work with. It's not just everybody dip your hands in a cookie jar. And then it obviously limits how much you can spend or buy. And if things change, legal expenses become more anticipated projects. Then we come back to you for a budget amendment and either recognize at that time or get approval. And finance department keeps track of all those, bring it back as a budget. We try and do those over. So.
And if I may step in, for those that haven't gone through this before, the biennium process started 9 years ago, a long time ago.
8 years ago, it was in place when I got here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the first couple of years I was on council, we made the transition from an annual to a biennial, which allows departments to flex across that transition from one year to the next a little bit more and allows them a little bit more freedom to be able to spend in a timely manner and appropriate manner without having to worry about hitting that kind of 1 year deadline. It also allows us to only have one major budget process every 2 years, so it frees up that odd or even year, whatever it is, for a lighter touch and doesn't burden the departments as much. So definitely major benefit to doing the biennium. It's just this year is our biennium, so we're spending a lot of time on it.
Slide. Budget process, you'll look at this and go, well, we're not following that because as you'll see in the August, September timeline, community partners presented to the mayor and city council. We moved that out just we had time in the front. So this is just in general, how it flows from calling for the departments to prepare the budgets, just considering what they've asked for, presenting the budget with finance, community partners, the mayor introducing his budget, and then the process as we go through final budget related legislation was adopted by city council in November. That's our goal. Other than the tax rates, and some utility rates, we don't actually have to be done until December 31st, but nobody wants to do budget over Christmas. So our goal is always to be done for Thanksgiving. We have in past years, even last year, come back and wrapped up in December, which is just fine as well. So it gives us some leeway for things to happen. So just to take you kind of through the spring process, you remember we had a council retreat, identified future city priorities, like budget. Staff meets and discusses what came out of that, what each department's doing to meet council goals, transportation projects. I think you've seen some movement with our new public works director, on some of that forward, our former public works director who's capital project, other capital projects. So just kind of as a level set to make sure we're all on the same page, administration, council. As part of the budget process, update any necessary city plans or policies. And also budget for any necessary city plans or policies. I think you're gonna see is we are in dire need of, and I'm pre-selling something I'm gonna ask for, but strategic plan. If you look at our strategic plan, it was 2016 to 2020, and it was too much detail about the dollars. It's supposed to be more of an aspirational document. So we really need to look at that because it is also actually something that the auditor expects to be attached to their reports, because that then they see what the goals, the aspirational goals of the council are and how they're being implemented through budget, et cetera. So that's part of the city plans and policies. Official call to budget, which has already been done, and then department teams start estimating what they can figure out in next slide and what they're gonna need in the future.
With mentioning the strategic plan, I assume that that's not something that you're gonna try to do between now and.
Oh, no,
So
no, this would
no,
be,
okay.
this would be next year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this would be.
Not part of this budget process. That's,
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it'll just be the dollar.
I,
Yeah.
that's what I expected.
Yeah. No surprise, we're getting then we continue with budget estimates, and departments are just about done with those. Those, then the finance department, Trish is working to take their spreadsheets, port them into our large spreadsheet, which Lindsay and I have already populated most of the revenues, project percent increases. An example is property tax. We do it 2.5%, just because you get 1% plus new construction. On average, you get some roughly 2.5% increase project out. Sales tax, things like that. I think a lot of our larger partners, Seattle, they do a lot of budget estimating, forecasting future percentages. They talk about the adjustment for our economy here. Finance administration build the budget. That's what we're doing right now. There will be program enhancement and change forms. This is where department directors tell us what they truly need. Whether we can finance it or not is another story. And anything that is included in the mayor's budget, you will get those program enhancement change forms as part of the transmission. So you can see what they asked for, why they asked for it, but then they'll also kind of present to council, each department director, to answer any questions you may have about what they're asking. And then present year-end revenue and expenditures as our August goal is to give that to you, as I mentioned earlier, and working towards getting the mayor's preliminary city budget to you on September 10th. Since preliminary budget, detailed department presentations, I already mentioned those. And then city council moves, so probably end of September, close to start of October, when you really get into budget deliberations and recommendations each other for the things you'd like to see or things you'd like to see changed within the mayor's budget. And then you work towards proposed city biennial budget with the agreed upon revisions through your deliberations. We hold the public hearings for property tax, utility rate increases, user fee schedule, budget related items, get the rates and tax ordinances, resolutions to the county prior to the November 30 deadline. And then work towards adopting the budget, whether that's at the same time of that last meeting in November, or if we roll into early December for adoption of the budget. We did that last year, worked well, finding out the outcome of the levy, so you can pivot if necessary, to make any changes, and it'll be the same this year. As I mentioned before, the budget that comes to you will be balanced based on it, but allocated fund balance supporting that. And if the levy were passed, then we would pivot and bring in the new revenue. As you remember, what you're putting before the voters is less than the delta, so there'll still be a little bit coming out of unallocated fund balance, but the majority coming out of the levy proceeds. I won't belabor this one, just throw this in for anybody who looks at this afterwards. The budgets in circles roll up into the budget gray above, so the general fund includes your budget stabilization, your council contingency fund, and your strategic opportunity fund. When you're audited, those just roll up into that. That's the total amount that they look at as far as the cash you have on hand as a city. Same with your sewer utility fund and your surface water utility fund. Those are just sub funds in there so you can break it out and identify what you want us to pay for, like your strategic opportunity.
Can I make a recommendation, especially now that we have fund numbers on our dashboard? We ensure that the fund numbers on there. And but now we can tie the two together because we've already got it on our dashboard.
Lovely,
Lovely.
Jessica taking it out, so I'll take it too.
Thank you. Any questions about the fund structure?
We don't need to go over this. We already covered this earlier.
Huzzah.
Questions? Questions about the budget cycle or process or anything I may not have mentioned in that. That's our pretty standard presentation every year. If there's something else that's really not accurate, I'm happy to try and answer it.
Well, one thing that I'm thinking about, and this may be a topic for another day, but I'll mention it now to flag it for anyone else who wants. We've been talking about more council outreach and conversation. I wonder in the fall if I'm thinking about the presentation for the comp plan, when that third place where there was space to put out some poster boards and have people come in and have more of a community conversation about it. And I know during the campaign, there were a lot of questions about what the budget goes to and how it's all allocated. Is it worth trying to think about something for the fall when we have that proposed budget and we know roughly what its shape is going to be, that we can get some of that community feedback and I didn't realize that we were see what some of the questions are that people have as we're trying to finalize it, so that there's time to build that in. Is that something that's been tried before? I don't need to.
No, I mean, we haven't had any community meetings about the budget outside of budget and finance meetings, cows. We hold a lot of special meetings during this process.
Just connecting it back to the conversations about, outside of council. Is there something like that worth exploring?
Ask me later.
Yeah.
Finance. I know, I say, we couldn't.
Nothing you need to decide today for sure. Just it occurs to
It
me
may
while
be
we're
something we want to look at in the future. It may not, this may not be the year for that, just given the strengths we're up against, but. Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get more people to discuss budgets is beneficial, because it's not fun and exciting. So I think say it's not a sexy thing to talk about, it's just numbers, so. But it's very consistent.
And it's numbers that connect to people's daily lives.
Yeah.
So if there is a way to connect it to that and get the community's feedback, then but can only be to the good. Yeah. So.
I have a couple comments. Any other comments from my colleagues? Sure.
Are there any major, I guess basically I would say infrastructure type stuff that we have to worry about in the next couple of years? I was just seeing the news report about this huge water main break in West Hollywood. And I'm thinking, that's hard to budget for, but at the same time, we know our infrastructure is getting on 78 years.
Luckily, we are not a water district.
Right.
And when sewer lines break, it's not so much a break as it's a backup. We have maintenance that we do on those. Through that, when they put TV cameras up and down the lines, if they recognize issues, they can come in and slip lines. So everything we have is unpressurized. We have to worry about. So I don't see anything huge like that. I say the biggest thing we have probably is something we're addressing right now with the single station design. That's something that can go sideways. I mean, we can always address it because we just hire a company that has a Vector truck and they come out every day or two and pump it out. If necessary, we did that during the last power outage. They were there every day or two to keep the levels down. So, yeah, nothing, the biggest things are that and then the capital facilities master plan that Frederick Dickinson is working on. There's a few things that need to be done sooner than later. I would say the generator is one of those. It's going to come up soon, GDAC systems. And those are hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're on the right path to address those types of items.
Thank you. Good question. Yeah, I think the facility improvement project's gonna be the big one that we can anticipate. Then of course, the ones we can't.
Yeah, well, it's just like the mold that we had. We had net anticipate that it works. You don't know it until all of a sudden it books its little head out, costs you $100,000. They're looking up.
Do we have a sense of when the legislative agenda come out? Because that oftentimes pairs with a financial ask that is kind of related to budget, not directly, but kind of our budget priorities tend to sync up with that.
They usually contacts me around August or
Okay.
early September, so that's what we've been bringing that forward. Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm gonna ask for this.
No, we will either, but
But it'll be, actually, it won't be a bid buy for them either, so they'll be all to ask. I can tell you that anything transportation is gonna be difficult. We're still trying to set up meetings between the city or legislators and WashDOT to have some good, honest discussions about investment, operations and maintenance, not just building roads. So I know that would be an ask that we'll have, can get those meetings facilitated summer and early fall. Perfect.
and then we had created an update to our reserve policy. And the strategic opportunity fund, we need to kind of build a new policy that we can put into our municipal code. So we're gonna want to have those also wrapped up, so if you could give me a timeline of when that would be useful. To work into this process with council, because you're busy, so I'm just bringing it up now so that we can plan ahead. Yeah, and then as I've mentioned in years past, the art fund policy update, not necessarily the biggest thing in the world, but it hinges on capital projects, which we're moving into doing some capital projects. So if we were to want to take advantage of that art policy, this would probably be a good time for us to polish off that old policy and get it for what our current needs are. So just kind of a heads up of those things, the only ones I can think of that are kind of tied into this process. Tangentially, but part of it.
Yeah, and I know some version of these, strategic operations.
Reserve policy.
Reserves, so the reserves you set. 15%, but that goal.
I can't remember if we need to do
I don't think we need to do anything.
to actually update the.
I think it changed 16% of
Whichever's
revenue
greater.
rather, yeah.
That
that was
was
a change.
expenditures
Yeah.
instead of revenues, and that's already been done. And then there was a goal, but that.
Yeah,
Like the goals and the policies.
yeah,
so.
no, I just can't, I guess I haven't, just the update of financial policies with that in it would be useful. So we know that it's been caught and that we don't come back later. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I'll
had
have to
that.
take a look at it. I don't know if work was done.
Yeah, because I know that I think we had a vote, but we didn't have like a resolution or anything to specifically do it. We just need to make sure that it's been reflected in the actual financial policies that will be part of the budget. It'll be the comprehensive financial policies are always in the back of the budget, so just want to make sure it's accurate. Sure. Yeah, those were the only kind of comments I had. Any further comments regarding what and how budgeting happens? Yes.
We were talking about the community partners, and I was remembering. At the beginning of the year, one of the orientation things that I did was NUSA, and they were talking about the common application that a number of cities have. Where human services groups can apply for funds from different cities. And the Lake Forest Park did not participate in that, it's more that we identify partners and work something out directly, that there's not a application process. And I wondered if there was would there be any reason to pursue something like that? Or is it not, would it not be constructive to everyone's time?
So the larger cities are CDBG eligible, so they're 50,000 plus population, so that the allocations from HUD go straight to the city. Our dollars go to King County and then are allocated. There was a process several years ago to make sure that what they were doing aligned with the goals, like Forest Park, at the time it was determined that they were doing stuff to the benefit. It was low income affordable housing. So we don't, I work in cities, I run CDBG programs, but where we don't have an identified amount that people can apply against. I would think that if you wanted to go that route, council would need to identify that we're gonna put X amount of dollars into community programs every year and have everybody apply. You do get to the point at times where maybe not funding in somebody anymore, you're funding somebody new, so that's the push and pull of that. But I'd say without additional dollars allocated, it's a process I would recommend going into. The last one that we added was Oak Street, which is the opioid group that is mostly getting people in touch with resources if they have opioid problems with it. And that came through the chief. He was at a presentation. He knew that we had these dollars that had been allocated that we can only spend on things like that. So it was a perfect alignment with dollars that we were sitting. So I'd say first it's a discussion as a council of are you going to allocate more and what is that? And then if you go down that road, how do we staff it? Because it's quite a bit of work and there's a lot of verification that needs to go on. Not so much if you're not using federal dollars. It's a little cleaner because city dollars, but I think the auditors pretty much look for the same thing and you're going to want reports. We make most of our community partners do the same way, just based on CDBG reporting of the number of people served and people served from our community. Those questions that I ask the class of how many people are in the senior center, how many are you serving? Who are you serving? Who are you missing because we don't give you more.
And we, as I understand it, that is like a reimbursement sort of program where they show us that they've served our community and then they get reimbursed for the money.
Yeah.
So it isn't that they get it all at the beginning and then they spend it. It's we verify that it is in fact supporting our community and then they get reimbursed for the support that they provide.
I think that some of them at this point, depending on what it is, it's just they report against it. It's
Depending on the relationship and
the only dollars.
But yeah, so I think that's just part of the limitation that we had is that, we would need more people to use their services in order to provide them more funding, or they would have to open up a different,
Yes.
opportunity to serve.
To give an example, during COVID, we gave Hope for $200,000. They didn't spend one penny of it. Nobody within the city of Lake Forest Park applied, and we advertised it. They advertised it. Nobody took it, so we never actually gave them any money in reimbursement because they weren't able to spend it. So that's where you run into that. Try and do nice things, which we tried, but nobody did have or asked for the dollars. I'm sure.
Yeah. Chicken and egg, they need to know about it, they need to use it, but
Well, and Hope Link's good about that.
Public's actually, yeah, they're.
So I think it was just there was a need.
And that's where I wonder about an application process, that it could surface something, but I think we probably know about the groups that serve most of the community.
Yeah.
So,
And I would hope they'd feel comfortable coming and talking to us.
Yeah.
If they felt there was a population that they either were serving or wanted to serve.
Yeah.
Being a small city, it's a pretty low key conversation to have.
Yeah.
So always welcome anybody to who feels that you can serve our population. Maybe not during budget season, but we're always here to listen. I think it's the important thing. So you're. Anything else budget related? Perfect. I think that's a nice quick evening. I don't have anything else on our pseudo agenda. So, and we're already adjourned from the official committee meeting, so I suppose,
Go home.
we're done. We can go home.
Slink away.
We just, yeah, sleep off.
Yeah.
And so thank you for joining us.